Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth By the Minute Arsenal podcast of the season. We've been away for a couple of weeks, of course, on the international break, which is very dull, and it's good to get back to some proper football. It's Matt H here in the chair. Now, my normal partners, Matt V and Julia, are both unable to be with us tonight due to real life getting in the way a little bit, but hopefully they'll be back with us next week. But it's not just me wittering on for 20 minutes, so you'll be delighted to know. I'm very pleased to say that we have Pete with us. Hello, Pete.
Hello there, Matt.
Hello, Pete. Now, Pete is someone I've known for donkey's years. He is one of us. He's a season ticket holder, was at the game on Saturday, and can give us that particular view. And an act of chivalry on his part also meant he had a slightly better view of some of the action than he might have done otherwise, but we'll come to that later.
Let's say you probably could have chosen just about any one of 60,000 other people in the stadium that day who'd be better informed than I am.
Well, you're doing yourself down, but I know you've been going to the ground for, again, donkey's years. So interesting to get a different opinion. Right, but before we get to Saturday's game, I wanted to tidy up the transfer window business, because at the end of the last pod we hadn't quite confirmed, but the Mustafi and the Perez dealings were pretty much agreed. But what we didn't know at that time was departures. So since then there's been Gnabry obviously has gone on a permanent deal, but the bigger news really, for everyone, not just Arsenal fans, was the Jack Wilshere departure. He's at Bournemouth for a year's loan. Personally, I think it makes sense. I think the midfield was looking a little congested for him to get into. But Pete, do you have any particular thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, depressing, I think, really. I mean, a big fan of Jack, and I think he probably had to do it because I think he would have struggled to get into the team. But I'm not sure. He must have been pretty desperate, because, you know, there's a possibility he could have ended up in the Champions League final. Okay, not that much of a possibility. But if it stayed, you know, there is a chance that he could have ended up playing in the Champions League final this season. He must have been desperate to get in and just looked around and thought there's too many good players here, and I don't want to fight for my place. I want to try and play every week, and maybe he thinks that part of his injury problems maybe were down to not playing all the time and not being a constant first choice. Maybe that's why he wants to go, and that's why he has gone. But I do find it a bit sad and depressing, really, that he's gone. And hopefully he'll be back. I just hope he has a good season for Bournemouth and comes back and is the brilliant player he should be for us.
Yeah, I mean, I love your optimism about the Champions League final, of course, but to me, I'm with you on a lot of it. I mean, I was looking from the more positive side of it. Gives him a chance to, you know, play and all the rest of it. But for me, it rather sadly has it's almost like the first part of the end, if you like, at the beginning of the end, that kind of thing. In that, this is what you do: you send someone out on loan, and there aren't many that spring to mind that come back. Nicklas Bendtner, of course, but that's perhaps different. That wasn't necessarily an unqualified success. Oh, there you go. So it does work occasionally. But
occasionally, if we're desperate enough to have someone back that we've completely given up on.
I was going to say that wasn't really planned, was it?
That would be a miracle.
Yeah, that would be that was the other problem with that. So, yeah, so I agree. I mean, it's interesting in all the discussions. Whilst people have talked about the fact, obviously there is, particularly with the signing of Xhaka and others, there's quite I wouldn't say a logjam in midfield, but there's plenty of players there. The focus does seem to have been not really on his ability, but it does seem to have been on getting games under the belt. Which is an interesting one, because it sort of almost puts that "is he good enough" issue to one side for perhaps future discussion.
Yeah, I can't believe Wenger wanted to let him go, though, to some extent. I mean, he obviously must have been happy to do so, but why, you know, sure, had he lost faith in him, maybe, and that really thought that he needed to take some time away and see if he could prove himself elsewhere?
I mean, given it's a year, there is time, like you say, for him to come back, but it's going to be. I wouldn't put much money on him being a regular starter next year for Arsenal at the moment. But of course, he could have a stellar, few months.
Well, stellar few games, and then he'll be injured for the rest of the season.
Well, yes, that's realistic, but not quite the upbeat sort of tone that we're going for. So, all right. Well, we'll see how that goes. I'm sure we'll be keeping an eye on him throughout the season, of course, because we wish him well, certainly. Let's move on then to the Southampton game. Well, left it late, but it's another three. I can say that now. Another 3 points to go with the 3 points gained at Watford the week before. Winning's a good habit, but it was it lucky? Was it? What do you think?
Yeah, it was lucky. It was very lucky, but we probably just deserved it. Was it a penalty at the end? Who knows? I think probably not. And but then again, maybe it was. Everyone seems totally undecided about it, other than Match of the Day commentators who said it definitely wasn't.
Well, Jamie Carragher, I can give you almost live news, because whilst waiting to do this, I was watching the Monday Night Football, and Jamie Carragher thought it wasn't, but now thinks it was a penalty. And he points out something I noticed actually, which was the referee was blowing very much for that first shirt tug. He wasn't blowing for there was a potential for was the foot up afterwards, which brought Giroud down. But if you look at the footage, you can see the referee is blowing pretty much straight away. And they mention this idea of this new directive about the shirt pulling, and they just think this may be an example of that.
So we better get used to it then.
That was the other point they made, exactly. So when it's going for us, that's fine. But I can imagine people being a little peeved if it goes the other way, certainly. But yeah, so penalty was a bit lucky, but it was nicely finished, nicely put away by Santi.
I must say, there's nothing like seeing an opposition goalkeeper dive out of the way of a lot.
Those balls that go down the middle, I know it's been said a million times, but if keepers stayed in the middle, they would save more than they do. Let's put it that way. I mean, wanted to look at some other things. Well, Koscielny in total, actually. I mean, all right, he was on the floor being injured at the time he won the penalty, but that overhead kick, which you had a good view of because you swapped seats with someone who wasn't as well prepared for the North London weather as you were, but that was fantastic to see. I mean, he really is a leader, isn't he? He really does what's necessary.
Oh, it was fantastic, and I'm pretty sure it's the best goal he'll ever score. It was quite a moment, and we did have a really good view of that, actually, and it was quite something to see the ball dropping out of the air, and you could think, oh, that's going to Koscielny, and he seems to be lining up to overhead kick that, and but it's Koscielny, that's going to hit someone in the face in the crowd. And somehow it nestled in the corner, which was just fantastic. And, he does have not a bad scoring record for us. And so good on him. He really took it nicely. And there was nothing unlucky about that, definitely.
He scores those key goals. Sorry, he scores those key goals as well, doesn't he? Newcastle for one, that comes to mind, and others as well. And Wenger sort of alluded to that as well in his press conference, or at some point since the game, saying he doesn't just score when you're 4-0 up. He does it when necessary.
He does it just when you need him to. Mostly on the last game of the season, as I remember.
He made a good habit of that. Yeah, West Brom as well, isn't it? I think he's done it against. There's some worry
earlier, all the better.
There was some worry that he was going to miss the game tomorrow, which we'll come on to later in Paris. But the latest I looked at earlier seems to suggest that he was going to be okay.
He's interesting. He trained with them today, apparently.
Yeah, apparently the eye that he got the bang on hasn't come up quite as much as they thought he would. So that's good news. So yeah, I mean, inspirational might not be too bad a word to use about him. Just looking at the lineup before we get to the new signings, something that did come up, of course, was Xhaka wasn't playing. Now, was this just? I mean, you might not know the answer. Is this just something? Is he being rested for tomorrow, basically, or do you think there's something else going on?
It was annoying, and I suspect it must have been that Wenger is prioritising the Champions League over anything else. Basically, if he thinks he can survive without players for a particular league game in front of a Champions League game, he's going to do it, and I think that's why he did. Presumably, similarly for Alexis and Giroud.
What is
Ozil.
This is interesting because they didn't seem to cause comment. That seemed obvious, but for some reason I've seen in a couple of places people wondered if as another new signing and he wasn't involved. But yeah, perhaps it's just keeping the options open.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a bit annoying. He obviously wants to. Presumably, he wanted to look at the new signings, and that's why he played them both. in advance of that Champions League game. I would have preferred if he'd just stayed with the side that he played against Watford and just swapped in the new signings and not had the other changes as well. Because I think, but I think against PSG we'll see a much more similar side to Watford. I just found it's just one of those annoying things that Wenger will do, isn't it? But I think it's definitely about giving those players a bit of a break before a big away game like that. And I'm not sure it's a good idea. I think maybe it's better to get the side that you want to play in that game together and give them a go at it.
I mean, speaking of which, I mean, it seemed to be, or speaking of the team in general, I should say, but there seemed to be Oxlade-Chamberlain, from what I saw, it's not coming off for him at the moment, is it? It's just not working for him.
No, well, he's really particularly good at pinpoint crosses into empty space where there aren't any players.
We've got enough players that can do that. We don't really need any more.
No, we really don't need it. Going back to transfers, you do wonder why Joel Campbell went and the Ox stayed. He obviously has somehow more faith in the Ox, and so far he's really not doing what he should have done last season, and he's not making that step up. But let's hope he comes good.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's great to have those options. So we got the 3 points. A little bit lucky, perhaps, although a little bit unlucky, perhaps, with the own goal, as it seems to count off the back of Cech from the free kick.
Yeah, was it unlucky, or have we now seen another Cech weakness?
Has he done it? Off the top of my head, I'm not brilliant to remember these details, but has he? I have a vague idea that it's happened before, but I'm not sure.
Not so much the fact of the own goal, but just not saving it,
right.
Bar. I mean, he got a hand to it, and why it didn't go over the bar, I'm not sure. And it wasn't dissimilar from the Coutinho one that went straight in. I mean, they were both good free kicks, fair enough. But you do begin to, last season we saw the whole problem with down low at the near post, and now maybe it's a free kick problem.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, again, something we'll have to keep an eye on. I mean, we don't. Obviously, we have backup keepers, but Cech, it was seen as one of the part of the spine, isn't he, in the team? So
he is. I don't want him going anywhere.
No, I just mean to the bench if necessary for a game or two. I wasn't going to say we get rid of him, but hopefully it's a one-off. But it's something. Yes, hopefully I'm sure brighter minds than ours are keeping an eye on that.
Yeah.
And speaking of keeping an eye, the new signings, they both started, perhaps slightly surprising. I think we thought Mustafi would probably start, but Perez we weren't necessarily sure. It's one game, and the word so far that they sort of received wisdom seems to be, well, there wasn't really enough, and okay without being spectacular. Did you see anything that you thought was particularly good, particularly bad, or worth comment?
Well, from Perez, not a lot. I mean, I was surprised that Righty seemed to suggest that he was not getting in the box enough, but every time I looked up, I saw him there and saw people just not finding him in the box. So he might have had a lot of touches outside, but I think probably if people had found him in the box, he'd have got a chance or two. But yeah, I thought he played right. You really couldn't tell from what I was pleased that Wenger made substitutions with half an hour to go for one.
That's quite exciting.
It was quite a moment.
And I think we mentioned that in a previous pod, unless I'm just imagining it. But it's obviously something that people who do not know each other apart from podding or footballing or whatever have obviously noticed completely independently. So I can imagine that was a thrilling moment for all concerned.
Yeah. But you couldn't judge much from that time on the pitch. But I think he'll be good for us. And Mustafi, well, again, is for the two players coming in from a new country, first game, new culture, new team, new teammates. You can't really judge a lot from that. Mustafi was not great, was he? I mean, I thought, if anything, the way we were lucky was that Southampton brought on Shane Long.
Yes. No, I had a note about that. Yes. He really could have done more damage than he did. Let's put it that way.
Certainly could, and that was down to not very good defending on our part. So, hopefully that partnership will come together. You're not going to buy a £35 million defender and not play him, are you? So we better get used to it. And him and Cosbeck get used to each other. But, it was reasonable. Thank goodness for Shane Long. That's all I can say.
Yeah, well, he hasn't always that hasn't always been our opinion of him. Let's put it that way. So we'll take that where we can get it. Okay, so I mean, it's 3 points. It's not a classic. We got a little bit lucky, but Koscielny was a bright spot, and we can wait a bit and see how these signings do. I mean, the classic example with any Arsenal signing, of course, is to say, look how long Henry took to settle in. I mean, I'm not suggesting either of them are going to be in that level, but it's worth bearing that in mind. I think we're both old enough to be given a bit patient and given a bit of time. I appreciate some people might not be, but we okay, great.
Played a bit better than I thought he has done in the last few games.
Sorry, who was that?
I think Monreal played a bit better than he has done in the first 3 games.
He was a favourite of mine last season and for a while, but yeah, he hadn't been A1, so that's pleasing if that's the case.
I thought he seemed better, and it wasn't a free kick that Tadic won.
No, so it seems.
He got the ball. So yeah. It's not all doom and gloom at the back.
It's not, and every team that wins the league or challenges has games like this. It's a shame, it would be nice to have some nice 5-0s again like we used to, but maybe I'm sure they'll come again. But after the start we had, the first home win, it was is something that we needed. So good to get that particular monkey off the back, I think.
Certainly.
Right. Sorry, go on.
It was a good atmosphere.
Sorry, that was you've reminded me of something I was going to say. Yes, I wondered about the atmosphere, and particularly the last sort of 5 minutes of the atmosphere as well.
Yeah. Not toxic. That's how
Blimey. Print that on the stands. Print that on the tickets. Non-toxic atmosphere. And that's interesting to know. I mean, that was certainly the impression I had. I wasn't able to be there, but that was the impression I had with what I did see. That it wasn't quite, Villa of a couple of seasons ago kind of standards.
No, not quite that.
Well, I guess there's well, let's not try and analyse it, but let's just say that's a good thing, and hopefully that will.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was because people felt pretty positive all the way through it, even though it wasn't going great. People weren't just getting entirely depressed. And to be fair, again, the substitutions coming early. I think they changed things and make people get excited again.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's there we go. That's a nice, promising way to end that particular little bit. We're zooming through the time. I was going to quickly, we'll just come to the end of really, and we'll start with the previews for this week. So first of all, we have our opening Champions League game. So we have PSG tomorrow. We're doing this on Monday, so it's tomorrow night at 7:45. Of course, we're away. We're in the group with Basel and Bâle, or however you say it, and Ludogorets, I believe the other team is. So for the moment, it was drawn. PSG and Arsenal was seen as the two teams favourites to go through. Obviously, we'll see how things play out tomorrow. But you'd assume it's the toughest game is first for Arsenal, which is probably not a bad thing. So 2 questions really. How do you think we do tomorrow, and how do you think we'll do in the group?
Tomorrow, I reckon we'll get a draw.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
It's on the basis that I hear that PSG have defensive problems.
Yes, I haven't caught up much about them, I must be honest, but the bits I've seen say they're not quite the same team they were last year. But, there is this idea, and I think we may have mentioned this in an earlier pod, that their domestic competition is so, non-existent in terms of the teams they're playing, that when it comes to the Champions League, they're perhaps not ready for that. I'm not sure I quite go along with that, but it's an interesting discussions. So any kinks we can find in their armour will be useful.
Yeah. So apparently their defence is falling apart, but they have, fortunately for them, got rid of David Luiz.
Of course, yes. So it can't be all bad. It can't be all bad if they've got rid of him.
And they do still have Cavani, do they?
I've been terrible actually. I haven't done enough Champions League research this week, so I'm as far as I'm aware. But someone will tell us otherwise. But of course, they don't have Ibrahimovic, and as you say, they don't have Luiz. I don't think they balance each other out in some way. But so we'd hope for a draw tomorrow. I mean, that's a standard kind of thing. I guess we'd hope for with pretty much any Arsenal Champions League game as a minimum away game at least.
A win would be nice.
A win would be lovely, but I think we'd take a draw. What about the overall? Do you see this as a team that can get past the round of 16, or the round of Arsenal, as it is unkindly called now?
I've already said we're going to the final.
Jack Wilshere is going to be devastated.
He's going to be regretting that.
um, but if I can perhaps bring you down to earth for a second, do you see us being involved come March?
Seriously, I think it probably depends what we talked about earlier, about whether new signings settle in and we actually find a team that plays well together, and that's going to take a while, isn't it, to come together. But I mean, I was confident last season that we'd do well in the Champions League, and we just did exactly the same as ever.
Yeah.
But I'm always optimistic at this time of year, and I see no reason why we shouldn't qualify probably in second place from this group. I think we might even nick first place.
That would be that would be nice. I mean, the problem I've always had in the past is the frustration that we can get good results, in matches and when we have to, but we seem to be quite slow starters. So you put yourself behind the eight ball before you've really got going. So, and then of course the other issue is who you get drawn against, we have no control over that apart from the first or second. But as I know we've talked about ourselves, just between us, if you finish first, you might be unlucky enough to draw the team that finishes second that should have finished first in their group, if you see what I mean. So you can aid your cause by finishing first, but it's no guarantee.
No, exactly. You could come third and go into the Europa League.
Oh well, we hope not to go down that particular route, so avoid that for now. And then once we've done that, of course, very quickly move on to our next league game, which will be next Saturday. It's another 3:00 against Hull at the KC Stadium. Hull obviously had a decent start to the season, but all the talk before the season had actually got going was about the trouble they were in, the very small squad they had. Disagreements, should we put it mildly, between the owners and the fans, and also of course problems potentially with owners and managers and all the rest of it. So are they still favourites of relegation, or more to the point, what can we do? We should be winning that game next week. Can we win it? Will we win it?
We should win it, but I think they do have how many players have they got now? They did actually get some in, didn't they?
I believe a couple. I don't know quite enough about Hull. I believe it doesn't seem to be quite the crisis it was at the start of the season.
No, I mean, they obviously have got a pretty good manager in my feeling, and I think in some ways, barring injuries, etc., having a small squad can be good. I mean, I think Leicester showed us that last year, that if you get a team that play well together and you get them playing in a certain way, and they know how to play, they do it week in, week out, you can keep the same players out there, you can do really, really well that way. They're 7th in the table? They're only...
they're level with us, pretty much, yeah.
And we're only ahead on goals scored, aren't we? I think they'll be tough opposition. They beat Man U, didn't they? No, sorry, they lost to Man U.
They lost. That was their first defeat after their...
They were looking very good and then lost a last-minute goal, didn't they?
Yeah.
So they're no mugs. And, as I say, if they can keep that team spirit and that close team together, I think they'll do well. And they'll be difficult for us to beat, but you would hope we would do.
You'd hope we'd have a full team, that assuming no injuries against PSG. You'd assume that would, we'd see the benefit, hopefully, of not seeing Sanchez and Ozil and the others the week just gone, and they'd all be back, assuming, no problems against PSG.
Yeah, well, he certainly shouldn't be leaving them on the bench for that one, should he?
No, and yes, I don't know if I want to see substitutions after half an hour. It might depend on how things are going, but that's for the PSG game. I hope things aren't. I hope things are nicely under control against PSG, so we don't have to panic, and then we can. It's just better preparation then for the whole game, which it's early season. We don't really know how it's going to go, but to be honest, if we're going to be challenging, we need to be winning those games. So.
Surely the big question is, will we be wearing that third kit?
Well, I believe we discussed the kit in the previous podcast. I mean, I hope not, but they've got to sell them. So I assume.
It's been lucky so far.
Well, I suppose if you think of it that way, yeah. Well, that's like we're going to love it by the end of the season, aren't we? It's going to be.
It's going to be like that gold shirt.
I liked the gold shirt. I know it wasn't
the thing of beauty.
It wasn't for everyone, but I liked that shirt. Okay, well, I think we have got through the rough agenda that I had set. I have my Nicklas Bendtner story. I don't know whether to do it now or whether to do it next week. I'll do it now because Pete may not have seen it.
Please do.
Oh, it's only a really little thing, and anyone listening has probably already seen it. It's on the Guardian website, so it's either from the Guardian or possibly for the Observer, because I only saw it yesterday. And it's an interview. It's a piece by I forgot his name, Daniel Taylor, I think, talking about when he met Bendtner in 2009. And it's this idea about he couldn't believe this guy had so much self-confidence, much self-belief. And in the story, there is a discussion or a quote from not psychiatrist, much a psychologist, I don't know, a doctor who gave Bendtner and the rest of his team when he was playing, I don't think it was Arsenal, maybe it was a national team or something, gave them all a survey to fill in, which was about your view of yourself, your personality test, if you like. And one of the sections was called self-confidence. And on a scale of 0 to 9, Bendtner scored 10, which I apart from the whole Spinal Tap edge to that, I found that a particularly amusing story. I think we're justified in putting that in because obviously Arsenal will play Forest in it's not this midweek, obviously the next midweek, I think.
Next midweek, yeah.
So I was going to say, that's what I was going to save it till next week, but I had to get that in there because that's had me smiling all day whenever I've thought about that. He didn't play, I did notice at the weekend. He wasn't even on the bench, I believe, for Forest, because they were one of the TV games.
Excellent.
But, his one excellent season was for, well, I say excellent, I might be overstating it, but was for Birmingham, wasn't it, when he was on loan there many years ago? I know I have a Birmingham City friend fan who still now will rave about, well, rave might be overdoing it, but will be nice about Bendtner. So anyway, I thought I'd end on that note. And that's us. I think we're done. So, Pete, thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute to keep me company.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. That's been excellent. Hopefully, we will have Matt, V, and Julia back next week. But this is not to denigrate Pete's contribution. So, we'll get you back later in the season if you're happy to do that kind of thing. I
shall look forward to that and try and have something more interesting to say.
Well, no, thank you. That was excellent. That's I think that covered pretty much everything we have planned. So thank you very much for that. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will be back again next week.